everyone, welcome to Bops and Blackness. My name is Cheyenne, and today I'm going to be highlighting 9 albums that I really feel deserve a lot more recognition and more praise for being great bodies of work. So I'm super excited to get into this video. These albums span from 1986 to 2005, so almost 20 years of music that we're talking about here. So I'm very excited to talk about these albums, and let's get into it. So the first album I'm going to be talking about was released in February 1986. Don't mind me looking down, I'm looking at my notes, but it is Precious Moments by Jermaine Jackson. This album is like it's just everything. This is my favorite Jermaine album. It's just a pure R&B album. Straight up 80s R&B. So I just really appreciate Jermaine as an artist. He's just like, I know people have their reservations about him, but I really enjoy his music. This album specifically is very Marvin Gaye oriented. Like, it really showcases the influence that Marvin had on Jermaine, and that's why, like, that's part of the reason why I find it really comforting, because, you know, Marvin's just a great artist, a legend. So to hear the influence that he had on Jermaine like so clearly on this album is just everything. So Precious Moments by Jermaine Jackson. My favorite songs on this album, I actually have a lot. Like, in my review for this album, I was like, whoa, like, I didn't realize how many favorites I had. I have 5 favorites from this album. They are Precious Moments, which is track 4, and then Our Love Story, which is track 6, I Hear Heartbeat, which is track 7, Voices in the Dark, which is track 9, and Words into Action, which is the final track on the album. Words into Action, I would say, is the most heavily influenced by Marvin. Jermaine actually mentions Marvin by name in the song at the end of the song. He kind of just shouts him out because, of course, this album was post Marvin's death. So yeah, this is just a great solid album. I really feel like it deserves more recognition because, you know, I just feel like Jermaine as an artist in general deserves more recognition because he has some really great music. So that was Precious Moments by Jermaine Jackson. And yes, so the next album I'm going to be talking to was also released in 1986, October, and that is Lovers by Babyface. Here's the back. This album is just exemplifies Babyface in his standard. You know, he's always going to provide us with the smooth vocals, the beautiful lyricism. Babyface has always just, from the beginning of his career, even like in the deal, he has always just provided such like sweet melodies, beautiful lyrics, just lyrics that just speak to your heart. It's really beautiful. This album I listened to for the first time, I think, in 2015, because that was when I started listening to Babyface's music. This is just such a, like, it's a pure, like I said about Precious Moments, it's just a purely R&B album. 8 tracks, classic. It's just, Babyface snapped on this album. It was actually re-released in '89 after Tender Lover, so I think that's when it started to pick up more traction, but I still feel like it's an album that I should highlight and talk more about because it's just such a beautiful body of work. Like, even the cover, like, the cover is beautiful. It perfectly like sets the tone for what you're gonna get from the album. I have 5 favorites from this album, and they are Chivalry, which is track 3, I Love You Babe, which is track 4, Mary Mack, which is track 5, Faithful, which is track 6, and Take Your Time, which is track 8. So yes, that is Lovers by Babyface. I highly recommend this album. Like, when it comes to Babyface, like, you're just gonna get quality, and that's why he's one of my favorite artists. He's just amazing. I really just appreciate everything about him as an artist. Next up, I have an album that was released in October of 1992. I actually realized there's a lot of October albums on this list. But this is Benét by Benét. This was Eric Benét's first release as an artist. This was the group that he had with his sister and his cousin George Nash, who became his lifelong writing partner and producer. So this album is just like, it's the perfect introduction into the amazing voice that Eric Benet is. When I went out of my way to listen to everything that Eric pretty much had his voice on, even just like features and background vocals. And I was so happy to learn about this album because I feel like it's such a sneak peek into the beautiful vocals and like that he's been delivering since this album was released. It was released in '92, like I mentioned earlier. I didn't expect to love this album so much, really, because like I know, at least for me, when it comes to albums that like you don't hear as much about, you kind of expect there to be something about it that really stands out to justify the reason why. But with this album, I could not figure out why it was not a hit, aside from like the promotion, and there was a lot of that went into this, which was the reason why I didn't necessarily blow up, because record label things. But this album is just, I love it so much. Like, it's just that classic early 90s R&B. This is it's not too heavy on the New Jack Swing. It has a little bit of those elements because it's a product of its time, but like this is a purely R&B soul album. It's just, I love it so much. I actually have quite a few favorites from this album as well. Never Get Enough, which is track 2. Something Real, which is track 7. Stranger Things Have Happened, which is track 9. Until We Meet Again, which is... Stranger Things Have Happened and Till We Meet Again are like some of Eric's best vocal performance like that I've ever heard, like throughout everything that I've heard so far. Well, I've heard everything, but so far that he's released. His voice is just everything. Like, I've seen him twice live, and I will continue to keep seeing him every time I have the chance. But he's just like, his voice has always been like, he's always presented such consistency and just remained true to himself. He's just like an ideal artist for me. Like, I love Eric. He's just incredible. So yes, this is Benét by Benét, released in '92. The next album I'm going to be talking about today is Pootie Mac by Belle Biv DeVoe, which was released in June of '93. This album, compared to Poison, this album is so... It's like, it has that underground, gritty, dirty sound. Like, it's just like, there's something about it. Like, it's so much more mature compared to Poison. And I actually prefer this album over Poison, like, by a long shot. This album is just like, Belle Biv DeVoe presented themselves as more grown up, and this was only 3 years after Poison, and a lot had transpired from that point forward. So this album is just, they talk about like, it's so much different than Poison in its subject matter. Poison was so much more about, I think they had something to prove. They definitely had something to prove as the three members in New Edition who didn't present themselves as solo artists, so they had something to prove as a group stemming from another group. So this album is just, I just really appreciate it sonically. Like, the thing about it in comparison to Poison is that Poison was more dance focused. I think there was more of an emphasis placed on that New Jack Swing, especially because it was released in 1990, which was like that era. But this album also like really gave Ricky Bell a chance to shine vocally, because with Poison, we got a few ballads and Ricky had the chance to really shine on that album too. But this album, he really carries the songs that he is singing on. He just did such a good job with this album, and BBD as a whole just killed it. Like, I don't necessarily remember the reasoning behind this not doing too well, but like when I listen to it, I'm just like, I don't know how it couldn't have. But yeah, I love this album so much. My favorites from this are the title track Pootie Mac, which is track 5, and Please Come Back, which is track 10. That song is like so heartfelt and just and Lost in the Moment, which is track 11. Actually, it says it was a bonus track. I actually didn't know that, but Lost in the Moment, if I had to pick one, it's definitely that one, because it's just, the sound of it is just so unique. Like, the production is so unique and so different. But yes, Pootie Mac, Belle Biv DeVoe. This is just such a good album, and I recommend anyone who hasn't heard it to give it a listen. The next album I'm going to be talking about is slightly related to the last one because it is by Gill, who of course is another member of New Edition. This album is most definitely my favorite Johnny album. It's just so purely R&B, and it's honestly, it was released in '96, October of '96. This album is so special because I feel like this is Johnny's most R&B based album since his 1985 album Chemistry, which is just everything, because like New Edition, like the tree of New Edition, like everyone who released albums in the 90s, Ralph, Johnny, Bobby, BBD, it was so New Jack Swing oriented, and I think there's nothing wrong with that. I love New Jack Swing, but this album in comparison to Provocative, especially Johnny's '93 album, it is just so much different. Like, this album is more ballad heavy. It's honestly, it's more serious, not serious in like a dry way, but it's more mature. Johnny is presenting himself as a more mature artist. You can really hear the influence of Luther and Teddy on a lot of the songs, Teddy Pendergrass on a lot of these songs on this album. I just think Johnny like really shined on this album. His voice just really, you can tell that his voice really matured. And Johnny's always been, from the beginning of his career, he has always had such like a beautiful and voice that carries so much weight. But I think it shines the most on this album. And here's what the back looks like. My favorite tracks are Touch, which is track 2, Take Me, I'm Yours, which is track 6, It's Your Body featuring Roger Troutman, which is track 8, and then Love You Right, which is track 11. In my listening of this, I listened to this album yesterday to prepare for this video, and I was just like, oh, this album deserves so much more. It's crazy. But that's what this video is for. So the next album I'm going to be talking about is a fan favorite. It's such a gem. Embrya by Maxwell. Embrya is my favorite Maxwell album. It's just like, if you don't like Embrya, then I'm kind of just like, what do you not see? Because Embrya is just like such an experimental, beautiful, self-expressive album. It was released in June of '98. It's just so special to me because I feel like Maxwell was really like establishing the fact that you can never really predict what he's gonna do, because he's just not one of those artists that you can have expectations with. Like, that he's gonna deliver vocally, that the songs are gonna slap, that he's gonna kill it with the lyrics, but you can't really predict his sound. And that's one of the things that I really appreciate about him. One of the many things that I really appreciate about him. He's just Maxwell. That's the best thing that I can say. But Embrya is so beautiful and summery and warm and comforting, and just like Maxwell, he really snapped on this album. He really did snap on this album. And I think he was 25. Yes, he was 25 when this album was released, which is just like, when you think about how young Maxwell was, and he was just creating these staples and just doing his thing. Like, Maxwell is always going to be a favorite artist of mine. Y'all, if y'all follow me on Twitter and Instagram, you just know that I love Maxwell. I've loved Maxwell for so many years now. He's just so special. He's just one of those special artists, once in a lifetime artists. And Embrya is like the perfect album to showcase that. My favorite tracks on this album are, let me see. My favorite tracks on this album are Luxury Coco Cure, which is like probably like a top 5 Maxwell song for me in general. Know These Things Shouldn't You, which is just such a, it has that eerie sound, that eerie sound and that dark sound that and his voice is just so gentle and beautiful on it. I love that song so much. And then the final track is another favorite of mine, which is Each Hour, Each Second, Each Minute, Each Day of My Life. If you've seen that title, you know that's like super long, but Maxwell, that's what Maxwell does. But that's another favorite of mine. Embrya is just such a lovely album. Like, that's really the best way I can describe it. The next album I'm going to be talking about is a true gem, like the definition of a gem. Many people don't even know about this album, which I was surprised to find out, but this is just such a special and comforting album by such a beautiful and amazing person. And I am talking about Street Faërie by Cree. And this is the back of it. This album I heard for the first time last year during my Lenny Kravitz journey, because he produced and arranged this album with Cree. This album is just so, like, Cree has just the most warm, beautiful and comforting voice, and I love her anyway, but like when I listened to this album for the first time, I was like, I love her even more now. And every time I listen to it, it's just like, it's just so special. So like, it was Lenny that got me into this album, really, but I really appreciate that fact, because like, it's just such a good, and like, it's just an album that you can play front to back and just feel so comforted, and just her lyricism is just everything. She's such a good writer and such a heartfelt writer, and I just love this album so dearly. I have quite a few favorites from this album as well. Track 2, Miss Moon, Deliciously Down. Track 4, Mean Sleep, which features Lenny, which is track 5. Fall, which is track 7. Smooth My Heart, which is track 10. And that's it for my favorites. But like, with the album like this, it's so hard to choose favorites, because like, I found myself like really struggling to like narrow it down, which can honestly be said about all these albums. Like, it's so hard to narrow it down when it's just such a great album. But yeah, Street Faërie, released in April of 1999, which was a month before I was born, so this album's extra special for that reason. The next album I'm going to be talking about is by an artist that is familiar on this channel already. Y'all already know who I'm talking about. George Michael. This album is Songs from the Last Century, which was released in December of 1999. This album is a comfort album for me. I love George down, like, y'all know this, but like, I didn't expect to love this album so much, because when you hear a cover album, well, at least for me, when I hear cover album, I'm kind of like, oh, because I'm not really sure, you know. But this album really just took me by surprise. Like, I put this album on where like, I just need to like mellow out a little bit. Songs from the Last Century is George's most, not underrated, but under-recognized, underappreciated. That's the best word. It's George's most underappreciated album. Like, this album really gave George an opportunity to use his voice as an instrument above everything else, rather than a channel for self-expression, which I think in the moments that artists get to just use their voice as an instrument is when they really shine and when they really soar. And the same thing can be said about George on this album. Like, he just, like, the vocal performances on this album, I think, are some of the best in his career. I always go back and revisit this album because it's just one of those albums that just make you feel comforted. His voice is just so gorgeous and so warm, and yeah, it's honestly hard to just put it into words. With most of these albums, really, it's hard to put into words how special they are to me, because it's just like when you find an album that you don't really think gets the recognition it deserves, it's hard to explain the importance it has for you, because it's almost like finding like buried treasure in a way. And that's how I feel about this album, because like I don't really hear much about it. And I granted, it was released 23 years ago, but even like among like other George fans, I don't hear many people talking about this album. So I really felt like it deserved some shine and some love. I hold 1999 albums very close to my heart, and this album is no exception. So yes, Songs from the Last Century. My favorites from this are track 1, which is Brother Can You Spare a Dime, track 2, which is Roxanne, track 6, which is Miss Sarajevo, and track 9, which is Wild as the Wind, and track 10, which is Where or When. This album really just showcases George's strong vocal ability, and it's just beautiful. I love it so much. The next and final album I'm going to be talking about today is by Ginuwine. It was released in November of 2005, and I am talking about Back to the Basics, front and back. This album is another one that kind of caught me by surprise. I didn't necessarily expect to love it as much as I do. I know that sounds bad, but like I don't mean it in a bad way. Sometimes like there are albums when you're like discovering an artist, at least for myself. When you're discovering an artist, there's albums that you haven't heard as much about, so you're kind of like, oh, okay, like let me see what this is about. And this was one of those albums for me. Like really, all of these albums I can say that about. The public perception kind of gets in your head sometimes, and it makes you think that something that you're about to get into may not be that good, especially when you haven't heard much about it. But that's like far from the case, especially honestly with all these albums I talked about today, but especially with this one. Like I don't think I heard much from it. Like there were no huge singles from it, but I still love it. It's just I really appreciate Ginuwine's music that haven't been produced by Timbaland. No shade to Timbaland, but like I think Ginuwine's music got more, his sound broadened, let me say, when it came to the music that he did without Timbaland. But this is just such a good album. It's warm, it's summery, it displays a more mature sound from Ginuwine compared to his previous albums. I mean, he was older, so you know, it only makes sense. But I love the direction Ginuwine went on this album. It's so like, it's genuinely like that, it's that 2000s R&B sound, but it's his own. Like it's so special. It's just a really, really good album. Yeah, I just love this album so much. My favorites are, and actually I have quite a few favorites from this album as well. Secrets, which is track 3. Want You to Be, which is track 5. That song is also like I mentioned with Precious Moments, it has that Marvin-y vibe. He also mentions Marvin in the song, which is special. Glaze in My Eye, which is track 10. I'm in Love, which is track 11. Track 12, which is Far Away, and track 13, which is Take a Chance. I actually just mentioned a lot of songs, but I couldn't narrow it down. But yes, that is Back to the Basics by Ginuwine, released in 2005. All these albums are just really special. When you find an album that you really enjoy, that most people, you don't hear a lot of people talking about, it makes you want to like champion for those albums. And that's honestly how I feel with these. It just makes me want to really just show them love and give them the shine that they deserve. You know, different things play into different outcomes, especially when it comes to music. It's really it comes down to like the science of it all, and the strategy of it all. And sometimes things don't go right when it comes to promotion and, you know, record labels and all that stuff. But whatever the case is, these are still great albums regardless of whatever got in the way of it, them not doing well. But I hope that by creating this video and by talking about these albums and giving them some shine, that more people will be more willing to get into these albums. They're just great albums, like all of them are, and I think that by showcasing my opinion and giving them a little bit of shine, that maybe that will happen. But I really enjoyed making this video and showing some love to some great albums. I hope that you guys will get into some of the albums that I recommended, and if you do, I hope that you leave a comment, or you can reach out to me on social media at Bops and Blackness on both Twitter and Instagram, or you can leave a comment underneath this video. I'm super excited for you guys to see this video and to hear my thoughts on these albums. I'm super excited to continue, as always, posting videos. If there's any albums that you think deserve more shine, leave them in the comments, or you can tweet me or DM me on Instagram, and I will be sure to give them a listen. And look forward to more videos from me. The older box set, some people have gotten theirs already. I don't know when I'm getting mine. I hope I get mine early too, but if not, you know, either way, I'm gonna do an unboxing for you guys. I'm super excited for that, so stay tuned. And in the meantime, I will talk to you guys on social media. So I will see you guys in my next video. Bye.